Old money is not loud. It is heavy, like velvet in a dark library, and it never raises its voice. Old money is a weight arranged across centuries, an agreement among the living to carry the dead, and among the dead to hold the living in a soft iron grip. What the world calls wealth, old money regards as custody. It keeps time by bequests and funerals, by codicils added in winter and revised in spring. It lives not in the thrill of acquisition, but in the relief of continuity. The grand lesson is boring and therefore perfect. When the world begins to panic, when markets shout and reputations swing like doors in a gale, old money leans on a sentence spoken so often it becomes a rite. Never sell the land. Every dynasty that lasts learns to build an inheritance machine. It is not romantic. It hums behind walls. It has moving parts, trusts, trustees, a family office with lights that are always on, a constitution that tries to fix the family's manners to paper. It turns passion into dividends and temper into term sheets. It wires the family together so that each greedy or frightened heartbeat cannot bring the house down. The young imagine a vault, the elders imagine a ledger. Both are wrong. The inheritance machine is a set of rules that changes the weather inside a name. Trusts, the machine's core, are a simple trick practiced at cathedral scale. One person surrenders legal ownership so that another person may enjoy the benefit, while a third is bound to the duty of care like a monk to a bell. The surrender feels like a loss and is a victory. The enjoyment feels like a gift and is a restraint. The duty feels like work and is a throne. In good trusts, the language is almost antiseptic. In great ones, it is elegant. The most powerful clause is not the promise of income, but the rule that forbids a forced sale when the world is frightened and bids too little for what matters most. History has been a tutor with cold hands. In the year men called the South Sea madness, fortunes rose on breath and vanished on air. Families with paper palaces disappeared between summer and autumn, while those sitting on unromantic acres suffered less. In the barring crisis of the late 19th century, a single bank's miscalculation threatened to topple respectable houses built over generations, and yet families that had arranged their lives through trusts were strangely calm. They had liquidity staged like fire buckets in a hallway, and they had trustees trained to disobey terror. Again, in the panic of 1907, when men invented the habit of standing in lines to withdraw money they swore they did not doubt, the households that had systematized caution found that the machine kept breathing even when they could not. Then came the long winter of 1929 and the drawn-out hunger that followed. Markets broke their own hearts. Names that glittered in summer went dull by Christmas. But some families had written into their charters that the land would not be sold, and the crown jewels of the portfolio would not be posted as collateral, not even when creditors were howling in the hallway. The arithmetic was ugly. The etiquette was calm. If something had to go, it would be something replaceable, something that could be bought back in a good year. The old houses sold the yacht and kept the shoreline. They sold the racehorses and kept the leaseholds. They sold the modern inventions they never liked and held the old freeholds they barely discussed. When buyers returned, the land still answered to their name. Across the sea, a certain set of London estates perfected the art of never selling. They discovered a patience that the impatient call arrogance. They leased rather than sold, sometimes for a term longer than a human life, and they ate with a slow knife. While others boasted of quick profits, these families walked their neighbourhoods and counted the passing decades by the repair of facades. Death duties swept through the great houses like drafts under a door, forcing the liquidation of pictures and silver and sometimes whole wings of the past. But the estates with clever lawyers and obdurate clauses found ways to endure. They rearranged assets, made deals with the taxman, paid in installments, and kept the freehold as if it were a lung. In America, the machine developed an industrial tone. A man known for oil set up his family office in the late 19th century, a quiet administrative brain that never sleeps. He understood that with wealth comes not freedom but assignments, and he hired the clerks and counsel to carry them out. The family office was a confessional and a command centre. It arranged taxes, watched markets, brokered private deals, instructed the children, endured the children, and wrote letters in a language that made temptation feel like a misprint. Other families followed, financiers who had learned in one panic or another that concentration was a narcotic and leverage a thrill with a body count. They built teams to manage danger as if it were a recurring holiday arriving with or without invitation. The family constitution is the machine's temper. It is the etiquette with teeth. It writes down what was formally muttered after dinner. In a good constitution, the phrases are demanding and unamused, duty before display, stewardship before novelty, family first but never alone. There are committees because committees are polite prisons. There are education rules because a fool with a trust is not an heir but an arsonist. There are marriage provisions delicately called agreements, which tell charm where charm may end. There are alternates and successors to ensure that when a trusted cousin suffers a crisis of conscience, the enterprise does not. There is a protocol for philanthropy that looks generous and is also strategic, because in a long game, reputation is an asset, like any other, vulnerable to rot. Trustees, that quiet priesthood, are chosen for stamina. The good ones are not dazzled. They observe. They have a talent for saying no, as if it were yes, and for delivering the right sum on the wrong day. They understand that their job is to be dull in public and relentless in private. They are trained to fear the forced sail the way a sailor fears fire. They organize the portfolio so that liquidity hums at the edges, ready to be siphoned into emergencies without disturbing the art or the land. They keep credit lines uncommitted and boring, secured by instruments that will not be missed when they are rehypothecated in a spasm. They know the rule: sell the thing you can buy back on a Tuesday. Never sell the thing that took your great-grandfather a lifetime to acquire. And when the charming heir appears with a story that smells like theatre, a good trustee reaches for the constitution and the calendar and replies as if reading a weather report. Some families, particularly those schooled by the tailwinds of the 20th century, put their patrimony under foundations that do not die. They seat cousins and scholars beside lawyers and make generosity an iron consequence. The dividends fund laboratories and orchestras, but also keep the voting power of the family business in a vault where weddings cannot reach it. This structure is not tenderness. It is control disguised as public spirit. It softens scrutiny, outlives heirs with interesting ideas, and keeps the enterprise from being sold in the sort of embarrassment that begins as a liquidity event and ends as an apology. The phrase "never sell the land" is half superstition and half accountancy. Land does not vanish in a night market. It is illiquid and slow, which is another way of saying it calms the nerves of the easily excitable. When the world is frightened, cash becomes expensive and dignity becomes cheap. A family that has written into its documents the primacy of land has pre-committed to a kind of survival that is too dull for the financial pages and too effective for the auction rooms. A parcel under a long lease, an avenue with its rents uprated once every generation, a corner with rights that took a century to negotiate. These are the quiet engines that heat the house when the boiler fails. Fear of the forced sale is the old enemy. It comes in many disguises: a lender's margin call, a tax bill that knows your exact birthday, a lawsuit that invites your name onto a letterhead you never meant to share. The inheritance machine arranges in advance that the bills are paid from cash and cleverness, not from the one asset that tells you who you are. Policies are bought to provide liquidity at death, so that the taxman is treated with respect and speed, while the hillside and the freehold never feel the hand on their shoulder. Reserve accounts sit in instruments so dull they could cure insomnia. The machine pre-negotiates lines of credit it hopes never to draw, and inked exit clauses for investments that promise to be forever and always mean at least one ugly morning. Consider the etiquette of heirs. In the movies, an heir is a peacock. In the minutes of a family council, an heir is an apprentice steward. The good ones learn to enjoy the sustained release of privilege, rather than the shot to the vein. They understand that duty before display is not a slogan, but a breathing technique. They know that the family's art collection is not decor, but collateral in a moral sense, proof that their people once chose patiently and will be judged for what they keep. They sit on boards that do not clap. They write letters of thanks that are never published. They learn the difference between taste and appetite. They are taught to speak in the conditional and to buy in the private markets where the gains appear later and the losses are written in a font so small it takes a magnifying glass to find them. Families that study history begin to sound the same. They swap stories about the 30s when well-capitalized officers bought junior debt like winter coal, and later discovered that each coupon was a new brick in the wall. They remember how some houses after the wars were saved through arrangements with the Treasury, and how a trustee with a knack for timing used a crisis to flip a burdensome lease into a century's worth of income. They speak of the 19th century merchant banks that treated reputation as if it were a single note held for years, and of foundations in the north that re-engineered control so skillfully that a dynasty could be humbled in the headlines and omnipotent in the voting room. The lesson repeats until it becomes a lullaby. Control what matters, distribute what you must, and never sell the land. A family office worth its stationery keeps a rule book of liquidity. Months of expenses are set aside in instruments that can be turned into cash faster than a dinner can be cancelled. The rest is arranged like a formal garden. Private businesses that the family understands life cycle by life cycle, property that throws off income in reliable seasons, a sleeve of marketable securities that can be trimmed without speaking to a journalist, and a small theatre where the young may make mistakes without burning down the stage. The office knows which assets are sacramental and which are experimental. It writes it down. Everyone signs. All of this would be unbearable if it were not wrapped in silence. The old families speak softly because they believe fortune is allergic to noise. They practice discretion as if it were a village religion and keep the children on a diet of disciplined boredom. Even the scandals, when they come, arrive with decent paperwork. A cousin is eased out of a partnership with a payment that feels like a punishment disguised as a pension. A painting disappears into storage and returns only when the newspapers have found a better toy. A trust protector changes an investment advisor with the same energy one uses to change the time on a clock. The inheritance machine is not a guarantee. It is a wager on human frailty. It assumes someone will be tempted. someone will be unlucky, someone will be brilliant in a way that harms the group. It assumes governments will change their minds, markets will dress up as philanthropists and thieves by turns, and war will occasionally step into the room like a rude uncle. The machine answers all of this with a script that has very few lines. Duty before display, keep a reserve, choose trustees who prefer insomnia to embarrassment, and never sell the land. On a rain-polished evening, you may walk through a district that one family has shaped for a century and not know it. You will see the stones breathing quietly, the leases ticking under the pavements like clocks, the facades reporting to documents you will never read. Somewhere, a committee is meeting. Somewhere, a young heir is being politely told no. Somewhere, a trustee is ignoring a pitch that has conquered everyone else at the table. The wealth you cannot see is arranging the world you can. It is not soft or sentimental. It is patient, the way a tide is patient, returning in patterns that make a mockery of weather. The fear of the forced sale never leaves. It lives in the habit of the hand that counts receipts after a party, in the refusal to borrow against a trophy, in the old reminder that humiliation arrives most often by invitation. Families that last instruct their successors to be dull on purpose. Buy well, hold longer than your enemies can breathe, rebalance as if filing a nail, and make sure your endowment can pay your bills without ringing the bell that calls the auctioneer. If the world demands an explanation, smile politely and talk about philanthropy. If it asks for your secret, give it the only answer worth repeating. We do not sell what tells us who we are. There is a superstition in old houses that the walls will whisper, if you let them, the names of those who were weak and those who were prudent. You learn to listen. You learn that the glory of old money is not a museum, it is a discipline. The trust draft is less a document than a tone of voice. The family office is less an office than a habit that survives its authors. The Constitution is less a law than a manner, and behind it all, the land waits, unamused by fashion, incurious about your cleverness, absorbing the mishaps and the triumphs with the same quiet appetite. When your hour comes to sign or to refuse, to hold or to sell, you will remember the sentence that made your people endurable. You will repeat it, almost cheerfully, as if reciting a prayer that has cost your family dearly and saved it more. Never sell the land.